Our last talk for today is being presented by Liz Fernando. Liz is an award-winning artist and photographer and is a graduate from the prestigious University of Arts in London. Her work mostly finds its roots in conceptual research, which delves into the role of photography, highlighting the different meanings that photography inhabits. This is often dealing with the notions of memory, wherein the personal archive inhabits a fundamental space, both aesthetically and practically, within non-Western cultures. Her work was exhibited at Tate Modern London, showcased by the leading publisher Photoworks, Brighton, and has recently been acquired for the private collection of the World Bank headquarters, Washington, D.C. She lives and works between Berlin, Hanover, and Colombo. Welcome, Liz. Lovely to have you with us.
Can everybody hear me? It's okay? No? Louder?
Yeah, that's good.
It's right? Okay. Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to show you two of my works in this presentation, and I'm going to start with this work which you can see here on the screen, which is called Passage of Time, and I'm showing this currently at the very beautiful Mls Literary Society in Egmore, close to Egmore, in the heart of Chennai. And I have decided to show actually two of my works, and I'm going to explain a bit more on the research behind it, because just like Chuchi has been explaining, my work is very much research-based, and I'm not producing a lot of work, so actually before I have a visual let's say a visual object of it, it's prior to it, it's most of the time lots of research which goes ahead of it. So starting off with this image, I'm not sure how much or how many of you have been already at the Mls Literary Society. Whoever has not been, I can just encourage, because there are three wonderful, at least two wonderful more works of colleagues of mine by Putu and Angela, and all of them kind of are around the idea of the library, the archive, conservation, and the issues which also go around with it, and also the importance of library. And just see these precious gems you actually have in Chennai. It's a 200-year-old library with I think about 50,000 books that have been preserved, and it's a private initiative by very warm-hearted people who are giving the time and effort. And I just encourage all of you just to go and check it out, even just for the venue. It's beautiful. Starting off with this work, as I was mentioned, it's called Passage of Time. Passage of Time evolves around the idea or the kind of fabrication of one of the oldest color photographic archives that was done 1901 by a philanthropist called Albert Kahn from France/Germany. And he was one of the first people, just shortly after the Lumiere brothers have invented the portable color photographic process. And he would actually send around 10 photographers around the world to archive this, or to fabricate this archive of the planet, because it was just to understand us in the time manner. It was shortly before or 10 years before the First World War breakout, and it's if you look at it, it's more or less the same questions what we ask ourselves in contemporary time. It's about understanding different cultures and different habits of living. And we just imagine 1900, of course, it was not as mobile as we are nowadays. So he used the object of a photograph to bring pictures or images, photographs, visuals like this back to Europe. And the underlying idea was for me to bring these images that traveled from here more than 120 years ago kind of back to a place where they were actually taken. So the first image which we see here is taken in former India in 1901, and this is now Pakistan. So it is a pre-separation color photographic image, and it's a very rare image. And what really struck me, my research is mostly about, and it surrounds the archive, and I'm going to explain later why that is so. And I just felt it renders a completely different layer when we look at colors, because we do know images from this more or less in black and white, and they're very, very limited also. And why they are limited is due to a research that I have done, or actually, I mean, there is lots written about it. There is a chemical decomposition that happens, and why I speak about photography from or kind of delving into a non-Western perspective is we have issues with conservation, and we have different issues here, especially when we are in Chennai, which is a coastal site, plus it is in South India, so you have a high degree of humidity here. So what does it do to an object? I'm going to explain later what I exactly mean with it. I'm just going to show you the series, which is, I'm just going through with you through the series that is hanging at MLS. And you see images like this, which is actually from Turkey, and it's a dervish boy. And what I have been doing is I took these images from the archive and selected a number of them, which is evolving around I mean, it gives slight hints towards this idea that Khan had about making or like fabricating this archive of the planet. And mostly what I'm showing here at MLS are imageries that were taken in India or the subcontinent, but I've also kind of fed in these images which are close to India, or which I also felt there's some importance to them, to show them. I have kind of worked on a chemical transfer process, and you can also see there are slight, you can see that the paper is teared off, and it's once you see it, it's printed on a very special paper, a kind of a mulberry paperized paper, and it's used usually for conservation of paintings. So these kind of layers also come in. So I'm referring to the fragility of the object of a photograph that one actually experiences in a southern context, or everything that is, let's say, south of the equator, where there's different climate conditions. And so these images are just shown in different ways, and I'm going to show you a little bit for whoever has not been there yet. So the way I'm exhibiting it. So if you access the actual archive that is in France, it is preserved in a meticulous way. It's 83,000 slides, which are still existing from 1901 to 1920. And I'm just questioning what would have happened if these images, which are deriving from here, would have actually stored here. And I'm just referring to it. It's more like a question that I'm asking. It's not something that I'm saying, so this is how it could be. It's more like something that I would like to trigger. And I would like to refer to Arun's talk in the sense, I'm talking about this since actually I graduated, which is about 8 years ago. I do feel there needs to be much more discourse on how photography could be understood or could be actually accessed from a non-Western perspective. And I'm, of course, taking more the Western perspective because this is where I grew up, but I have links, and my personal archive is linking in South Asia, or it's hosted in South Asia. And when we talk about caste and we talk about Dalits, photography is, in that sense, also very much responsible for the visual kind of clarifications that we have on castes, because it's ethnographic series or ethnographic studies that have been formed from the 1850s when photography was invented. And there's a very clear kind of cut to say, okay, these are like so-and-so caste, and this is so-and-so caste. And I'm just going to show.
The location of the photograph. Location.
Yeah. So
Location of the photograph.
it's you mean these ones?
Previous.
The previous. This was, yeah, Rajasthan. Okay.
Or North Karnataka
Could be, yeah. This is in Ahmedabad. And when I show you these images also, I mean, you can see because of these outfits they're wearing, and not outfits, it's traditional costumes, I'm saying outfits. But just to understand, when you look at it in a library and you sit in Berlin somewhere, you could also actually read them as outfits. It's not always understood as this could be from this and that place. So that's what I'm just trying to work in my work, saying that especially when like color photography comes in. And if you really clearly look at it, it's taken about 120 years ago, but if we ask ourselves, if we nowadays look in a National Geographic magazine, does it really differ what we see? So we carry the style of photography that was done 120 years ago when it still there was colonial, it was still like colonial India, and has it really changed? And that is why I'm just saying there is a lot of linking towards ethnographic studies or ethnographic documentation and holding on to caste systems. And I cannot really go on this because it would take just too long. I'm just like referring to it. And what you see here is in this work where I'm referring to this archive is that I'm also printing on glass, because the originals were of course taken on glass, and it's a very, very tedious process how it was taken in during that time. So it's done with potato starch and kind of exposed due to potato starch, which works as a filter. And I'm just referring to it working with glass prints and working like on this kind of rice paper that I've been referring to, just to highlight the fragility or how I've actually experienced photography in climate conditions like this. These are the images that I'm referring to, which I'm sure all of you have kind of seen, or which are like popping up when you just Google old images from India or archival images from India. So it is a very, it is, I mean, to me, when I was still studying, it was like at first I wouldn't really see there as some kind of strange kind of angle these images would have been taken. But after a while, I mean, if you really go into the discourse and if you see thousands of them, you notice there is some really unusual angle and some unusual staging of these photographs. And moving on, we can also see here there's always some sort of a description we can see, and just like between these two images we can see like the difference of the saris, how they're wrapped, and it gives visual hints on whatever like community this person belongs on, what caste it belongs to. And those images, I always say, they need academic discourse, they need even like artist discourse. And it would be difficult for me to speak about research like this without mentioning one person that has been actually very, very influential. And I've been sitting in a library in London and Rivington Place in Shoreditch, which is a center for Asian and African art. And I came across a book, and I saw a series of photographs, and I'm very sure that you are also aware of this image, which I'm going to show you now, and I'm not going to mention it because she is our wonderful curator. She is actually, this work is actually very, very influential to whoever is kind of like from an artistic perspective working with ethnographic research. And so this work by Pushpamala N is referring to or showing us or visualizing in a very kind of a direct way also how these images were taken. So it is purposely done to kind of have a watertight compendium of caste, of human beings in a different place. We are talking about, again, colonial times, and you can see in the second image here, So measurements were taken. So it's more like it was like so the archive we are working with nowadays, it's more something that has to do with, we're looking at studies. It's of course staged photography, but it's not studio photography. It was done for a certain purpose. And this is what, I mean, like my research is kind of, so I've seen these works, there's lots of academics who write about it. I mean, the connection between anthropology and photography. And this project was actually done, and that's why I found this archive to be very, very interesting to work in, because it was more or less the first archive that was as old as it was, which had this different layer of bringing color into it and speaking about traditional costumes. Moving on, I have shown this project before it came to Chennai in Colombo, and it was also exhibited in Colombo in an in the Institute of Archaeology, and it is again just it's a site-specific installation, and it changes its visual kind of outcome depending on which space I'm working in, but. So my visual archive, or my immediate family archive, is hosted in Sri Lanka and has more or less the same climate conditions which Chennai is suffering from, or South India is suffering from. So that is actually, I was asked in my third year photography in London, so what my personal position towards photography is. And my personal position is very much the reverse what we think about photography. Photography makes us sometimes, or gives us the illusion that it's something we are possessing. So the moment we are taking a photograph, we are possessing the memory, or we are kind of making sure that it's not kind of leaving us because we have some sort of a visual truth. And if you study photography, you very well learn very quickly that it's not so, it's actually the other side of it. It gives us maybe a small bridge, or it gives us a glimpse of what might happen. And in my case, another layer came on top. So I said, I have experienced photography as a very frail object. It vanishes because of hydrolysis, because of fungus that sets on photographs after a while. And I'm sure all of you have seen. So I've started this, I've showed this project in Colombo Biennale about 2-3 years ago. And it was the same kind of idea that I wanted to trigger, and I showed it in a very different, it was the Archaeological Institute, which is also an institute which every day has the struggle of trying to preserve, or trying to to work on conservation, to preserve certain things for the next generation, which has completely different tasks than one would imagine is happening in Europe or anywhere where we have different climate, or like more friendlier climate conditions. And you can see certain elements where I'm also referring to, as I've been speaking about, making these images as to have a watertight compendium about certain caste or class, or kind of tribal research also. And referring to the idea of archiving, you can see these steel boxes and references to it. So this is how it was shown in Colombo, and I'm sure whoever has been here at MLS has also maybe seen some of it. That sounds familiar. So these boxes I'm using mostly because it's kind of, so it was done, it is somewhere preserved, and then it's locked up, it's staying. It's kind of, so there's no proper kind of identification after. And my idea is of course, no, I guess we need to take a look on it now. I mean, we need to kind of maybe drag these things out, and we need to unlock these locks and kind of approach these imagery, because of course they are really important for the contemporary identity. And now moving on to MLS, I'm just going to show a few images, whoever is wishing to go to MLS. So this is the Mls Library. And it is a 100-year-old building, but actually MLS is more than 200 years, a library. And it was moved here because also the reason was it was earlier closer to the beach in 1850s. It was apparently closer to the beach, close to Marine Beach. And because of also those climate conditions, I mean, being close to the beach, the salt water kind of affects material in a bad way. It was moved inland, and what you see here is the entrance, and once you move inside, you can see this 100-year-old structure that goes actually from bottom to top, and it's filled with books and knowledge, and you just walk inside and you actually feel, you walk inside a space where you can feel the everyday struggle of handling hydrolysis. That is actually the hard piece of my work, and the decay and how time takes its toll on any sort of material, might it be paper or photographic objects. So it was obvious when I was approached by Pushpamala N and CBP if I would like to show this project Passage of Time in the Madras Literary Society, that I felt there couldn't be any better place to show. At the same time, when you see a place like this, is of course extremely overpowering, and you feel Angela Grauhold, she has been referring to the library as walking into a photograph, and I feel that is a very, very a good description for it. You have legacy where you're walking in, and you have history where you're walking in. And I felt, same like as the others who were exhibiting there, that we need to be also very aware of it, and we need to be also very respectful towards it. So we don't want to intrude, we don't want to come and overpower a place. At the same time, also we would like to show our work in a manner that is also kind of reflecting onto the space. And that was actually the task. And like moving on, I'm just going to show a little bit more on the process and how it has been developed over the past months, because it of course didn't just come on in one day. So the first thing is that to kind of encourage myself to do a little bit of research on the location, on the library itself. And so as I mentioned before, it was built 1901, or at least that was the time when the library moved into these premises. And as you can see, this was one of the first photographs I got from the CPB team, the production team, and one of the first photographs that the curator has sent me saying, okay, this will be like ideal, the place where you're going to show. And I'm like, okay, interesting, but it seems like, so it's a blank sheet of a paper. So you know, like more or less, you know, it's a library, it's an old library, it's a heritage library, and this is the former reading room, and so now work on it. And of course, I had like ideas coming up, and over the next few months, I was provided with images like this, with furniture that was that's actually available, and that was a very, very important part of to develop this process. I mean, I'm sitting in Germany, and I'm supposed to kind of come up with an on-site installation in less than 4 or 5 days, and to prepare for it is very important, and to get sizes and to get like an idea of what is available. Of course, you have to always have some sort of a margin there, because you never know like how it's going to work out, whether this piece of furniture will be there, somebody else will be using it, or something like this. So it's months of preparation, months of collaboration actually with the curatorial team, with the production team, to come up with the installation that is happening here. So photographs is one story. So one thing is, I'm going to talk about it also later, I'm not trusting photography so much. I'm a photographer by profession, but I don't trust photography a lot, and maybe that's because of my profession. So this is one of the first photographs that I took once I have been inside the space, and I've immediately noticed there is like an atmosphere inside this room that immediately took me. And what I've been realizing is this room didn't have, since it was built, electricity. So electricity was, you can just see on the right side there's like a little bit of wiring going on. And so electricity was just installed 1 week prior to my arrival. And it was something that really, really touched me, because I felt, oh, this room has been just kept like this for 100 years. And I realized the importance of these huge windows. And it is a former reading room. So 100 years ago, nobody would rely on electricity, nor was it maybe available. And reading room should have lots of light. So it was very clear to me, I'm going to use these windows, no matter whatever electricity is inside there, I'm going to use these windows as one integral part of my installation. And yeah, so the later you'll see it like actually how I've used it. So we have, as artists, also challenges. Once we move inside a heritage place, it is very clear to us that we cannot break walls, or do even use a small nail for hanging. It is very clear to us that we are not going to interfere with these things out of respect. And so there's also different, it's a challenge, and it is a very interesting process to work. And so what my solution was for hanging is, you see here, so this is the experience I had. I mean, walking inside this space is what a task it is every day to kind of, work with 50,000 books. And I've been, of course, engaging with the staff at MLS, and they said to restore one of the most important books they have in their library would cost 25,000 Indian rupees. And there are different programs actually which they're coming up. So there's a program called Adopt a Book. And I mean, working inside the space means actually in a way also, okay, I'm walking inside a space where it's very, very visible what passage of time can do. And what I've been doing is to also in a way, to kind of respect the place or the space or the location itself. I have been in different places kind of just leaving material I found in the reading room. I was not sure it was kept there maybe for many, many years, and it was also important for me to keep those materials. And so you can see in one showcase, I'm having a study, again, it's an ethnographic kind of a study, and printed on glass, that I have printed on glass, enlarged and printed on glass, next to a book that says People of India. So that is what I've been just referring earlier to. It's a compendium. Understand it as a compendium. And then I have actually photographs from MLS that is also 150 years old, which you can see slightly on the right. And so these are small little elements that I wanted to keep alive, that I wanted to say it's I'm not coming again to kind of take over this place. I want to immerse in that place. I want to embed it somewhere in my work, and it should feel it's maybe a part of it. And I would like to work with elements of what is a reading room, actually. I would like to refer to it. And so this was, my idea. And here you can see what I've been doing with those windows. So I have been explaining earlier, I have been working with rice papers, and it's mulberry paper, printing on it just to refer to the fragility of the object of a photograph in a southern climate. And you can see that image, what we have seen first. And there's an interplay with daylight. So you can see this image now being light is coming from the back. So it's it depends on the time of the day you're going. So morning there is, so actually lunchtime we have a very, very beautiful light. And again, referring to the time, so I've been wondering when would people actually come to the reading room and read. So they will not come around 5 o'clock, they will definitely come in the morning towards lunchtime. So that is, I don't know, maybe artistic intervention or site-specific intervention. And I mean, you can also see, so it's hanging on a fish wire inside these huge windows. And again, I was not able to just hammer a nail inside. So I had to come up with some sort of a solution. And we found these, again, 100-year-old hooks, which are holding some of these louvers. And so this is what I had to use. I was lucky that it was in the center. And so it's a center of this window now. And see, these are the challenges, and also these beautiful times when we, as photographers, as artists, can actually work with places. And work with the place means I have to kind of obey to the rules of the place, obey to the specifications of it. Here you can see actually how it plays. It plays with the background, it plays with the sunlight, it plays with whatever trees are around. So it's also a bit of a performative thing what is going on there. It's stored in these drawers of the library. So there are like 2 drawers which you open, and again you find these images, because they, again, like I'm asking the question, could have been stored here, and what kind of state would it have been here? If it would have stored here, of course people would have taken care of, but how much of energy would go inside to take care of photography like this? Yeah, so this is just like to give you a little bit of overview how it looks. So I'm working what you can see here is furniture from the original library. You see this most beautiful 100-year-old floor. Maybe it's also older than 100 years. And I have been using elements like this desk, what you can see, and the drawers are just missing. And again, referring to the missing elements sometimes, photography vanishes in the South until we cannot restore it again. And so these are these references, this empty kind of desk, what we can see, these empty shelves inside. You can see reading lights, and in the center you can see actually the equation of what happens in hydrolysis. So the moment the element of water comes in, and we have a humidity level in Chennai of about 80 to 90%, so obviously there's always water, and there's also seawater. And so the moment water kind of comes in, it destructs the organic pigment, and this is when photography actually vanishes. And that is the outcome. And I'm sure all of you have maybe images like this at home, or maybe like family members have images at home. And this is what I have been asked while I was studying. So what is your take on photography? And that is where I said, I don't trust it so much, and it's not, like from my perspective, taken to possess something, which goes very much with a very famous writer, Susan Sontag, who has been writing on photography about she from a different perspective, so I'm talking about this perspective. I'm moving on. I'm using this image as a bridge towards the second project I'm going to show you, which is also very much based on it. I mean, this project is talking about an archive, a random archive, so-called, and moving on to, yeah, it was my first project, actually my graduation project, that is very much based on the lack of photography or this destruction. I mean, when you are a photographer and you see material like this just irreversibly deceasing or kind of dying in front of you and you can't do it, I mean, the moment hydrolysis starts, you cannot stop it. It's irreversible. It is, yeah, because the same happens. And yeah, so lots, I mean, when I would go, let's say, on an annual visit or whenever to Sri Lanka, I would find these images that my parents would send back to their family home, and they would actually look like this. So I would go every year, and every year they will like look, someone at some point they wouldn't be there. And out of this, I have developed this project, Trincomalee. And Trincomalee is a very, yeah, personal project in a sense, but also it's not so personal because it talks about also a national kind of a trauma that happens. So I'm sure in Chennai everybody is aware. I'm showing this also because we are in Chennai here, and Trincomalee, I guess everybody knows what happens in Trincomalee and Jaffna here. And I took a different take on it in the sense I have not been in Sri Lanka during the civil war, nor do I know too much about it. But I'm maybe also a product of it because my parents have migrated, and so I'm talking about the earliest memory of my father's childhood because he was born in Trincomalee, and Trincomalee at that time was a very important harbor to the British, and so his family was actually posted there, and he was born. And I've been always wondering because it sounded very poetic and musical to me, and I've been never able to go because it was, of course, closed because of the war. And I've been asking when he doesn't know because he moved back to the capital when he was 5 years old, which again got me this idea of how does photography relate to memory because he doesn't have a single photograph of that time. And again, due to the fact that I've been showing before. And so what does it do to me? So where am I able to build up my identity that is my direct kind of family archive? So I don't really have a chance to do it because I'm not even able to go to the place, and I'm not able to access archives, I'm not able to see visuals. So what I've been doing is, based on these two very frail memories he has from that time, and the only memory he has was this friendship. He's from the Sinhalese community, and he had a Tamil girlfriend, so-called, when he was 4. And Tamil was his first language also, because that's the language he would speak on the roads, because they would speak English at home, and Tamil was his childhood language, and he would refer to it. And I just went, shortly after it was again possible to go to Trincomalee, and did my own, I staged my own family archive out of the lack that I have. So I was able to find still the original places, at least his school, and went on. And you can also see here, I mean, this is an old map of India and Sri Lanka, like, I guess also referring to the bridge between Chennai and Jaffna, I mean, like how much we are connected. And so I'm kind of showing these things. So this is Trincomalee. It has a natural harbor, and this is why it was a very important place back in the 50s. And this is one of those images that I've been staging. So it's a staged family album, maybe also of that desperate act of mine to kind of find answers to feed up that kind of missing piece in the jigsaw. And I've been working with 2 children whose faces also are like not revealed, in the sense, because I'm referring to the idea is I don't have a trace of it, and this memory is very, very vague, and even the photograph is vague. So all these kind of elements, they kind of come in. And you see here images which were taken in his former school, and it's again just like, yeah, some say it's uncanny, and I also do understand that a place like Trincomalee is not a mystical place. There has been like lots of trauma happening, and I don't also want to push that away, though I have not been engaging much and not been hearing, but it has this idea. And Trincomalee to my father is actually not linked to the memories of war. It is like linked to that memory of his girlfriend when he was 4, and her bangles, and all this way he's describing how she was dancing and singing. And it is, yeah, to me it was a very beautiful small memory, but also I think shows what other layer could be there to a place like that. Yeah, references to her. He was always talking about how her frock was kind of whirling around, and that. Yeah, it started as a book where I'm describing that journey, where I'm juxtaposing memory, my memory when I was very young, and his memory. So we grew up in very different places, and so out of that book, these images were taken, and this is how it looks installed. So we always have the book, and then we have some imagery from the book that is actually working as more or less a hook, or like an enlargement towards what's happening inside the book. You can see white, like what maybe looks like an empty frame. So the development of the work was also that I would take text from the book, and I have been experimenting. I guess what is also visible maybe in my work is that element of craft, or the element of how I work actually with my own hands. So that is maybe also giving a layer. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me whether I take photographs with an analog camera or digital camera or something like this, but I like this element of working also analog and giving it another kind of a layer. And I've been kind of given the chance to work in a book museum with old hot cast letterpress. I think you're calling it like this in English, I'm not sure. I mean, you know. Hot cast? past. I mean, the old, yeah, fonts. And so this is all what I have been kind of experimenting on. The reason why I've been doing it, and so my work is like very much whatever I do, it's like very, very conscious. I'm not doing things because of the visual idea of it or something. So it is embossed, like hand embossed. So I have to assemble each of these letters or like fonts. I have to assemble them, and the act of assembling each of these letters is referring to my act of assembling, let's say, my immediate family history that is maybe not really rooted in the place where I'm rooted or where I'm feeling home. And so that is the act that I've been doing, and yeah, I've been given the chance to work and just assemble all these things, and you can see these blocks here, which are then kind of fabricated then in different like ancient machines like original Heidelberg printing press and all these kinds. So I really do enjoy, because even the images you see from Passage of Time, they're all hand printed by myself to go through the process again. So I do enjoy, and I do enjoy all having access to these kind of things. And again, like it's a performative act. So this work kind of also is a performative act. I'm going to end my talk with this image of I guess all of you know, so it's the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. And this image was taken in 1982 when I was born. So I was born into a Germany which was still divided by East and West, and the Cold War was going on, and this was at the center of the Cold War. And I would like to end my talk on the note is that I've been sometimes asked, so where do you see like the relevance? I mean, you grew up in Germany and you call Germany your home. Like, I mean, we are a generation, we wouldn't even call ourselves this and that. We're Europeans, because we were like, we grew up in yeah, I mean, 89, the wall fell, and we were like people who were able to travel right through Europe without any visas. And the idea of Europe is very important to us, and what happens right now in Europe is of course disturbing. And I do see, maybe I'm one at this Chennai Photo Biennale. I am one of 49 other artists who have the chance to tell our story, and it is assembled very, very carefully by our curator. And I'm telling my story sitting in a place that is maybe apparently like geographically very, very far from here. But I'm kind of taking yeah, I'm rooted maybe somewhere else, or maybe I'm looking at material which comes from somewhere else. And this image shows how I actually imagine Sri Lanka. I was not able to go for many years. I mean, when I was small, but we would get, of course, photographs. But maybe also I didn't, so like just assembling the photographic material I would get, it was not like nowadays I would send like lots of WhatsApp images. So I don't know, my family would get maybe like 10 photographs a year from their family back in Sri Lanka. And I've kind of developed these like dreamlike plays with like elephants, and there are like coconut trees and small houses and whatever. And it's almost in opposition to what you can see here. So I mean, what happened to my identity is it's somewhere maybe hybrid in between, and I'm just talking about these things, and I do continue to talk about it. And to say, I mean, because I do essentially feel that talking about these manners will also help us to understand movement and migration in the world, and how actually where it derives from and what the problems are somewhere else. And this is what happened in Sri Lanka, and this is how I imagined it. And from the time I was born 82 and 83, the riots happened, and a civil war was the outcome of it. And books like this really helped me, like Susan Sontag's Regarding the Pain of Others, and Hannah Arendt's works on reconciliation. Hannah Arendt, just to say, she's a Jewish German political theorist. She doesn't like to see herself as a philosopher. And I've been very early like trying to read her essay. She shares the same city of birth of mine, which is Hanover. And what she's talking about is reconciliation. So I grew up in a place where we kind of hear every day about the Holocaust, and we really worked with those issues, and there is lots of discussion around it, lots of guilt also. And then my parents are deriving from a place where the Civil War has just ended, and maybe these ideas of reconciliation are still far ahead of the thinking in the common minds. And I was 16 when I started to read her essays, and the last year's documenter also kind of referred to one of her essays, We Refugees, where she has been talking about how she was a refugee in the 1950s in US. And it's still very contemporary what she's talking about, and I can just encourage everybody to kind of maybe go into her reading. And yeah, I'm closing up with one important film that I've seen a few years ago, and that is Head On. So it's actually Against the Wall. That's how we know it, by Fatih Akin, and not so much because of the content. So Fatih Akin did this movie around kind of a forced marriage in a Turkish community, and why he was praised so much for this film is that he came up with a language that was maybe not very, it was not graspable, so people couldn't really grasp what kind of language he's coming up, filmic language. He studied in Hamburg at the film school, but still his that outcome was extremely drastic. It was different. And I was wondering, and I saw that movie, and I kind of identified with him because I understood where his language came from. It came from parents who are maybe not originating the place he was born. And I hope we can continue to like bring up voices like this from different communities. Like Arun was also, he brings his voice from his community. And as I said, it's 50 voices altogether. So I'm just speaking for one, who are like assembled here in Chennai, and I can just encourage all of you, it's going on for another 2 weeks, to go and see what each of us has to say. I'm just giving an image of Germany and how it can also have a little bit of masala in Germany. And that's how I would like to close my talk. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz, so much. It's been wonderful having you here with us. Absolutely love your work and your show at the Madras Literary Society. It's so beautifully executed as well, and I definitely urge all of you to please go check out the show. It is also open on Sundays till 3:30 p.m. On other days, it is from 10 to 5. And now I'll open it up for questions. Any questions, comments? Yes. Liz.
Hi, Liz. Yeah. Shall we look at the evolution of photography from reflection in the water, then painting, then the greatest discovery of mirror, yeah, where the face is very mobile, the body is mobile and you can see everything, and then photography came 200 years ago or something. I mean, I'm just making just now, just 10 minutes back I was thinking. Like how do we get the image of Shakespeare? Nobody knows who is Shakespeare, but we always have a photograph, and a photograph of Jesus. And why didn't you look for your German history of photography? People say we should know our history of our country, you know, and our heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. I think was
Do you have a comment or?
No, I think, yeah. It's,
okay.
it's just taking
was that a question or it was a statement?
No?
Why didn't you look back into the your own German history?
Can you?
My father, my grandfather, you are talking about French photographers in 1900 or something like that. Why not? There's a lovely German photographer, you know. So at the time of Hitler, a black person who is an athlete, he wins. Hitler was very unhappy. Hitler says he will avoid giving him a prize. At that time, I forgot the name. She's a very famous German film director. So some 70 years ago, she goes to the field, Olympics, And she will make him run again and says he won the game. Thank you.
I mean, that is what you're referring to is part of Hitler Germany, because you're talking about the female filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. Sorry, and yeah. So what I would just like to say, yeah, I'm speaking about a French archive here, but really it doesn't matter to me where it was taken or whatever it is. So it does not matter to me whether I'm looking at German photography or Indian photography or whatever. What I'm saying here is that these photographs were originating in India, or let's say around the subcontinent. And to me, it doesn't really matter where, and it talks about a subject. So I'm just taking this as an example of when I'm in Chennai, I would like to speak about what happens actually. That is an archive you refer to as your archive. This is something where you look at if you want to trace, let's say, okay, this is my history, and I'll do the same. And so this is what I'm talking about. So in that sense also doesn't so maybe a German would do that with a German photograph. But also, I mean, these photographs, they matter to all of us. I mean, when we sit in Germany, so we look at these photographs and, oh, this is India. So that is what I'm just talking about.
Hello. I love the way you kind of wove the different ideas of memory and, your perception of how Trincomalee is and all that, and the reality that's quite different. It's kind of a fluke question. I mean, I'm not very clear, so just bear with me. But isn't all of memory comes from representation stories that are somehow misrepresented reality? That we think this is how it happened, but we know it from our art or from a sculpture or a temple. We've dug up stories that are forgotten, and that's been the basis of the history as we know it. I mean, Rome or Harappa, Modern, that everything, and somehow it's built on representation that's I'm pretty sure is inaccurate. No, so our memory itself is flawed, and our kind of vision of reality itself is a kind of skewed reality. So how do you see that? I mean, I don't know, did I explain it clearly? Because it's kind of
I got your point. So memory is a difficult thing. So that's what I'm talking about. So we sometimes have this illusion that photograph will help us to have this, possess that sort of memory. And so the moment photography comes into play, so we look at family albums, it's not very clear, even to me, is this a memory, or is this, I have this memory because I've seen that photograph in that album, I'm referring to it. So in this story about Trincomalee, it's very clear that I'm talking about a memory that now my father has based on his memory. I mean, there's no visual kind of bridges towards it. But memory, like you clearly refer, is even, I mean, we have something called meta-memory, and we have so many, Freud has been, there's too much about it. It's from a neurological term, it's never clear, and that's why I'm taking these images also in a very vague manner. I'm never really showing something clear, and inside that book you have lots of white pages, and you have seen these white frames, and actually these empty frames, but they're not empty. The moment you're coming closer to the frame, you can see the embossed writing, and it's again showing, if we take a closer look, we might not be able to see the full picture, but it's a process. It's a performance that we're doing if we are going back to some sort of a memory, but it's never really clear.
So for you, it's more like more of an inner dialogue rather than representing a reality that happened.
It's also a very scientific way, the way I'm working on it. It's referring to neurologic, but the artist, I mean, I cannot put a medical book on the table and say, okay, let's go through. It's a visual representation.
That was a wonderful session. So my question is, being born and raised in Germany, did working on a project on Sri Lanka serve as an eye-opener to realizing your the Sri Lankan cultural heritage? And I also want to know how important it is for an individual to go back to his or her own roots.
Thank you for that question. It's important. I mean, to myself, this, as I've been explaining, it was my first work, and maybe it kind of settled me in a way to kind of clarify these questions that I have, or this kind of vacuum that I've carried all my life with me. And to educate, first of all, to educate myself about that history that I've been maybe not experiencing to the extent, I should have, or I could have, or whatever, to different reasons. And I mean, I cannot speak for everybody, but in my terms, in my process, in my artistic process, it was, yeah, maybe an eye-opener. I mean, in that sense, I mean, it kind of settled the way, and it was like, yeah, I kind of can say, it's not, of course, answered. These questions, they will remain inside me, and but it was at least something to say, like a foundation to start from.
Hi, Liz. Just a couple of questions that we talk about what the information the photograph contains, and you have made very clear that you don't trust the photograph. But for me, there's also an emotional connect with the tangibility of the physical photograph as an entity. So we have this debate at the library every day. Do we actually, with the limited funds that we have, do we protect the information in the books, or do we protect the book itself? And for us, that's a debate that's not going to have an end, because we are on both sides of the fence. For me personally, there's an emotional connect with the book, just as there are people who collect first editions, and there are people, or for example, even a photograph. There are thousands of prints maybe of a photograph, but the real original photograph has a value. So there's a physical value to this as well as the emotional or the memory of it. And I just wanted to comment on that. Is it, if you were in my place, would you protect the physical as much as the information?
Complex question. I think I would protect, I mean, if you ask me like this, I think I would protect the information. And this is because, yeah, maybe my kind of take on photography. I know it's fluid and it's frail. Because this is, I mean, my research is also, I was still able to do these works, I'm still able to do my works. Though, yeah, when I look at my family archive, or let's see, archives in South Asia in general, or like in Asia, so there's not much. It kind of repeats itself, and you kind of come across always the same kind of images. And yeah, so like I've been explaining, they were taken under certain circumstances, and so still I was able to trace or work on projects like this due to oral history, due to memory, due to emotions, and that is something that I have been experiencing because of the lack of trusting on the object. People would, you know, talk to each other, like pass on messages or pass on histories or pass on stories from the past to the next generation. And I do hope that is kind of going to continue, though we are living in a different age of photography. Now there is hardly any difference between wherever, like it is, might be east, west, south, whatever, because it's digital and it's like hosted in clouds. So there's not so much of a difference anymore that we have, because photography in its invention was also a very privileged invention. It was not accessible to everybody. But yeah, I would say it's the information.
But that's the difference, because most of the members that we have want to come to the library because of the atmosphere and because of the ambience and because of the book itself, the smell, the mustiness, the dust or whatever. You know it, you've experienced it firsthand. Or we would all be on Google forever. So the bottom line is we survive because of that tangibility, not just because of what we have.
Yeah, and I guess that's important. And that's very visible in your place.
So for those of you who don't know, Mr. Prabhu Vishwanathan has been the key reason why we have Madras Literary Society existing in whatever form it is even today. He and some other members have very generously taken the onus to take care of this beautiful space, and also the reason why we have the permission to exhibit the works there. So may we have just a small round of applause for this wonderful initiative. And we're back to questions. Yes.
People of India.
No problem. Give it. There's a you show a book called People of India. Yeah, you remember? Yeah. The book is a very big book. Yeah. Do they have photographs?
I've actually not gone through it. It's
Huh?
just like, I've not gone through the book. It's too frail, you know, it's falling apart.
No, you should look for the photographs. No.
No, I mean, I was, again, like, it didn't really, like, I didn't feel like, again, it's talking about not interfering into the MLS as a place. In the book, you cannot see it here. It's very frail. and it needs protection, and it needs dedication towards conservation. But just like I've been saying, it's...
But for the research work, they could have given you.
No, because it's not, it was to that extent not important for me, like to see, because it would bring another layer. I'm speaking about this archive that was taken from this French-German philanthropist, and to bring in that was just like...
Actually, Joseph Wirschings is a very famous German documentary filmmaker in India some 78 years ago. His grandchildren studied in Chennai, and they are there somewhere. You know, they were in Chennai. They studied here. If you meet them, I'm told they got all the oldest photographs. You may get some oldest photographs of India and Germany. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Hello. You said that you like to print or do whatever it is to showcase your own work. So it's not like somebody else is doing that printing or etching or sketching for you. So the photographs that you have printed, are those gelatin silver prints, or it's just a digital print that you have done?
Autochromes. Originals are
okay.
autochromes.
Autochromes,
Yeah.
okay. So what about when you said that you also did some embossing or some printing on that after printing the photograph? So
That was a different project. So that these color photographs which you have seen, like these ones, these printed ones, that is for this project, the Passage of Time project. And this embossing, what I've been doing, it's based on this Trincomalee work, which I've been doing. That
so
book.
is it on the photograph you did? No, it's just
like these frames which you would see. These kind of maybe I can go back. Oh, no. Anyway,
so the blank frames.
Yeah, you saw these blank prints, and that is again like a performative kind of an act which the viewer would take or do to kind of reference to my own performative act, or like whatever act I've been doing to access memory, like what Mr. Prabhu was just talking about. I mean, what is more important to us, the information of the object or something? So, so there's this kind of thing. So you come inside the gallery venue or somewhere, and you see like there's a one like huge wall with some blank frames.
Yes.
And I mean, you have to play a lot with the lights inside the gallery, and it comes out very, very sharp. But the closer you come, actually, it reveals.
That embossing.
Yeah.
Okay. So your idea of saving the information from whatever you can salvage, but you're still in the borderline of loving the physical form of any artwork or anything that you do. So is it? I mean, am I getting it correct?
As I mean, in the position of somebody who I mean, I have to be very aware of, I mean, there are visitors coming, there are like viewers coming. So I, of course, like, I have to visualize that process. I have to make it also approachable. So that is one important thing. And the same what I've been, I mean, the way I'm showing it at Chennai Photo Biennale is very much making it approachable. The idea was that we talk about photography from a different angle. We are showing like photography is being shown in this biennale in a very interesting way, alternative way, but also it also plays with the idea of making it maybe less exclusive, so it's not in environments where I mean, it's approachable for school students. And how do I then install works like this? So I will not hide them in the most academic way I could maybe do it. I would like to also have something that, so the moment you enter this reading room, this person, he looks at you, because even the photographer, he was in a like, we call it the frog position, so it's like from below. And so even when, I was thinking actually about school children who are like actually very small, so once they enter the place, so this person looks directly at you. So that is things which we have to get used to, because of course we are working in our studios, but how do we make it approachable to any visitor?
So isn't it ironic that you don't trust photographs, but you are in a photo biennale? Yeah.
It's not contrasting at all, it's actually reality.
No, I said ironic.
No, ironic or like whatever. So I mean, it's part, that's what I'm saying. I mean, photography has different interpretations, and I guess, as I've been saying, we have 50 different voices here from 50 different artists, and that's the beauty of it. And one of them doesn't trust photography, being a photographer. So that's
What is the reason you
not trusting.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, I've been showing, I mean, photography vanishes. especially in environments like here. And Angela has been actually showing her library that vanished, and it is a very hurtful, whoever has been here, so when she speaks about it, and she's also showing it at MLS, how it overnight kind of disappeared, and she's kind of holding on to it. And what happens to photography here is it happens every day that it vanishes, and Prabhu, it happens every day that one book is...
Pushpa, you want to say something about her work? Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Everything vanishes.
Yeah, here.
I don't know. I'm able to communicate the question properly. Are you hearing? Yeah. I don't know. I'm able to communicate the question properly, but let me explain the basis of the question. You're working on the background from native, or native is different from European background. And you're coming here from seeing the Eastern arts, mostly the Asian arts. So I don't know about the painting. There will be a lot of difference in painting. The difference between the both art, both from the ideological perspective, from Eastern perspective to Western perspective. Like in photography, how you felt the difference? You felt any difference? How it ideologically plays, how it will change according to the landscape, ideology, people, how it approach.
So you're talking about like looking at the different geographical...
No geography. I'm speaking about the photographer actually, about the author who sees the photography as different art form.
Yeah. So the author is, of course, it's linking very well to why I don't trust photography, or, I mean, I should like outline a bit more, but it's one entire discourse. And so the author is extremely important in photography. And photography is not objective, never. It's subjective. Because the author, there's a camera. That's the mechanical device in the Benjaminian way. But there's some author, or like somebody who clicks that device, or whatever we want to call it. So that's what I'm talking about. It really matters when we look at archival material to get the understanding under which circumstances it was taken, for which purpose, and that is something that needs to kind of clarified since I'm working with archival imagery, I kind of ask myself that. So I'm getting like the idea of, or like the circumstances of under which kind of circumstances this was taken. So in this case, it was done with a good cause, like to enhance multicultural understanding, and that is very much needed nowadays also. So it's a very contemporary topic, but again, it was taken from an outsider's view. So if you would have taken these images 120 years ago, you would have taken it completely different. So it matters. The person behind it matters. It's not a machine, no?
I'm not speaking on individual perspective. I'm speaking about the group of people, the Western thinking, the Eastern thinking, the difference, basic difference, right? The difference between the two ideological stands, we can see it in painting and films and more or literature, but I don't know how it exists in photography. That's what I need some insight to know more about it. So my question is that you belong to the both background. You belong to the two extremes, for example, European and Asian. These are two divisions you can see. But when in approaching the photography, there is difference exist between these two. How it exists? Is it actually exist? I'm in doubt also about it. So my question is that
there is a difference when you look at archival. And when you look at archival, that's what I mean. So still, it has lots of influences in nowadays how people take photography. So for example, I've been seeing lots of photographs that actually derive from Indian photographers or Pakistan photographers or Bangladeshis who still work or have this idea of Orientalism embedded in photographs. And that is what I say, so that discourse needs, whether it's not so much about, like, I think we are beyond these times where we speak about, the post-colonial and all this. So that all has been discussed. But I'm just trying, like every other practitioner who's working on these matters, and is what we're just like as practitioners are trying to show is it needs to have investigation or at least awareness of it. So then only it kind of makes a difference. Because of course, I mean, back in the days there has been a difference, there has been a different thinking. We are speaking about 150 years ago, this is where there was imperialism, all these things were going on. But now we do live in different times, but what is required of us is that we just be aware and investigate to the extent we can.
Thank you.
Anyone else for a last question? Yes.
By looking at a photograph, can we find out by whom it was taken, whether it was taken by an Indian or a Pakistani or an Australian or a Britisher or a Frenchman? Can we be a detective and find out the origin?
They're indicators.
What are the indicators?
It's difficult to describe.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's not. It is. It's a depicting. I mean, the person which was photographed is depicting somebody from Pakistan or from India back in the days. But so I mean, most of the time we have captions by whom it was taken. But even I mean, there are certain ways how.
But if there is no caption, can we guess whether it was taken by a Westerner or an Asiatic?
Sometimes it's, nowadays, that's what I'm saying. So these questions, they are maybe not so important to me like anymore. But of course, I mean, I have been studying photography, so I've seen extensive amount of photographs. And I'm, after like so many years, maybe aware to see like, okay, there is certain things. But as I've been just referring earlier is, to have this material influences our contemporary identity. So that means if certain photographs were taken in India back in the days, like with the thought of like archiving them to make some compendium or something, you can see references are still like by native photographers. So that is there because that is what we are referring to. It's like unconsciously in our visual mind. And so that, of course, requires discourse in photography schools itself.
Yes, thank you.
So photographs are static. You can't make out painting, you can make out Manet or Van Gogh, or like you can make out, but not photograph because it's very static.
All right then. Thank you. That comes to a close to the Artist Talks today. Thank you, Liz, so much for sharing your work with us.